Hey, what's going on, everyone? I'm just going to switch over to my screen really quickly here. And this is going to serve as a pre-meeting to do for an upcoming class on the DBQ, practice for this year's APUSH exam, and also simultaneously a little quick period for APUSH quick review. So please make an effort to watch this before we have our DBQ workshop. For periods 2 and 4 class-wise, that's going to be this Wednesday, April 15th. And for period 7, that's going to be next Wednesday, April 22nd. So I'm just going to give a quick kind of recap here, bare bones, with notes of period 4 APUSH review. So period 4 begins with the year 1800 and lasts until 1844. So why those specific years? 1800 obviously marks the beginning of a new century and the election of Thomas Jefferson in what's often known as the Revolution of 1800. And it's really called a revolution because it is the first peaceful transfer of power from one political party to the other. If we recall, our first two presidents, both George Washington and John Adams, were Federalists, and Jefferson is elected in 1800 as a Democratic Republican. And remember that throughout our study of Jefferson, we're constantly kind of asking that question, how Jeffersonian was Jefferson? In many ways, he believed in things like an agrarian, small-scale farming country, small federal government, remaining isolated in a lot of ways, but a lot of his actions as president in many ways were contrary. And of course, the ultimate kind of hypocrisy of Jefferson is being the author of the Declaration of Independence, as well as being a slave owner himself. During Jefferson's presidency, we see the territory of the country double in size, a little bit more than through the Louisiana Purchase of 1803. Remember, this is, if we kind of think of really the desire was to control New Orleans and that port, and along with it came pretty much the entire sort of middle swath of the country, starting out in New Orleans and kind of Ving out northward. Lewis and Clark would explore that territory, beginning in St. Louis, the Missouri River, and kind of following it up to the Columbia River and to what is today modern day Oregon. It's also during Jefferson's presidency that the first and only successful revolution of enslaved people takes place in Haiti in 1804. And this is a revolution led by Toussaint Louverture, sometimes known as the Black Napoleon, and really does begin to kind of plant the seed in a lot of American enslaved people's minds that a rebellion is possible. And of course, we'll see this later in the United States in 1831 with Nat Turner's rebellion in Virginia. Jefferson is succeeded in office by his good friend and author of the Constitution, James Madison. Madison is president during the War of 1812, a little known war, but certainly a very important one. Really started in many ways because of the British practice of impressment, kidnapping American sailors and forcing them to fight in their army. The war is fought primarily as a naval series of battles, but it's also fought with many ground wars across much of the country. And it's during the War of 1812 that Andrew Jackson will rise to fame in the United States. Jackson is the leader of the Battle of New Orleans, which oddly takes place after the Treaty at Ghent is signed to end the war, but nonetheless, Jackson really rises to prominence as a military hero. Following the War of 1812, we enter a period that's sometimes known as the era of good feelings. Commerce is thriving, economics are thriving, and Americans are generally getting along quite well. A lot of that's going to begin to come to a head in the year 1820 with the Missouri Compromise, and this is sort of the first sign that territorial expansion combined with slavery is going to cause problems for the nation. In 1820, Missouri asks to be admitted to the Union as a slave state, and in fear of upsetting the balance between slave and free states in Congress, Massachusetts breaks off a chunk of its land to create Maine. And that geographic line at 36 degrees 30 latitude and longitude is drawn across the country, prohibiting slavery north of that line in future territories and allowing slavery south of that line. This will be the beginning of kind of a long series of failed band-aids. on the wound of slavery as we go through the rest of period 4 and into period 5. Andrew Jackson is elected president in 1828. If you'll remember, he ran unsuccessfully in 1824, and that was the corrupt bargain in which John Quincy Adams and Henry Clay kind of conspired together. But Jackson does successfully run in 1828 as a Democrat. So this is the first Democratic president. Jackson runs again as that common man. Every president prior to him was aristocratic, was wealthy, was well educated, and Jackson in many ways is a sign that American democracy, as far as white men go, is greatly expanding. And this is obviously also due to universal male suffrage. It's during Jackson's 2 terms as president that he greatly expands the power of the presidency through acts such as the nullification crisis, the second bank veto, and obviously the Indian Removal Act, saying no to the Supreme Court's decision and subsequently instituting what's going to be the Trail of Tears in 1835 under the presidency of his successor, Martin Van Buren. Culturally, this is also the era of our antebellum reformers. You may recall our speed dating that took place before Thanksgiving, which seems like eons ago. But really, we're beginning to see Americans take charge of political and social life and social crises in many ways. So our antebellum reformers include abolitionists like William Lloyd Garrison, Sojourner Truth, the beginnings of women's rights advocates, people like Susan B. Anthony, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and Seneca Falls in 1848. The temperance movement led by Lyman Beecher, really giving some foreshadowing of that. Education through Horace Mann, transcendentalism, Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau, as well as many of the utopian societies. And really these antebellum reformers are people who see the country expanding and changing, particularly in northern industrial kind of commercial areas through that market revolution in Henry Clay's American system, and feel that they want to take control of life. Lastly, and this is going to be a sneak preview of a lot of period 5, but manifest destiny and territorial expansion. It really is the expansion of American territory and the belief that that expansion is justified as a God-given right that is going to cause many problems down the road as we grow into the sectional crisis and the decades leading up to the Civil War. Texas is annexed by the United States in 1845 after declaring its independence from Mexico. And it's from 1846 to 1848 that we fight the Mexican-American War. And we'll say much more about that in my next preview of period 5 as we get to the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. So thanks for watching this, and hopefully it's been helpful and will be valuable as we look towards this next DBQ.